just had a lot of things in common. We both have like backgrounds in art education. Karina used to be an early childhood educator, and I've been teaching art to children and youth since I was in school. So together we wanted to do something. We didn't quite know what, but we also both have a huge passion for textiles and craft. So we got our brains together and we wrote a grant to do this project. The project is also titled Mending the Museum, which is our duo name. And I guess it came from both of our like discontent working in museums. We've both been cultural workers in the sector, and we are both no longer working directly in the institution. I think we felt very disappointed and feel, I guess, as people that have worked in museums, still feel a responsibility to engage with those spaces, because we feel like there's a lot that can still be done, that museums can be more accountable to. So yeah, and personally, I love the idea of like paying artists to critique the institution, which is essentially what the project is. So we invited 10 artists to take part in the exhibition. The exhibition is a digital exhibition, so this is currently like what it looks like. We enter the website. I want to basically show some of the images and go into the pieces that the artist made. We basically commissioned 6 textile artists and 4 ceramic artists to engage with the archives at the Gardner Museum and the Textile Museum here in Toronto. The prompt that we gave them is to respond to the idea of fragments. So that can be taken literally, like a piece of cloth or a broken plate or something like that, or also the lack of information, which is exactly what we found was the biggest challenge for all the artists. The first part of the project was inviting them to do research creation. So we did tours with the archives, and each artist chose a piece or multiple pieces that they wanted to respond to digitally. And then they had some time to create the works. And we've also included workshops as part of this program. So each of the artists is doing workshops with children and youth at the museums. That's a very important part of this project for us too, because we believe that museums can do more to engage with communities. And we want to basically make children and youth feel like they have agency in these spaces, and basically learn new skills as well. So as you enter the exhibition, you see the original artworks that the artists chose to respond to. I'll just scroll down. So we have Kaya Joan, Benray Isabel, Lan Florence Yee, Habiba El Sayed, Kendra Yee, Juan Pablo Hernandez Gutierrez, Shahir Zazai, Khadija Aziz, Chetza Pasipanoya, and Paola Torres Nunes del Prado. So I just want to talk briefly about each of the pieces, because they're really cool. So Kaya chose this piece, which is just a fragment of embroidered textile from England, and basically created a video that is not embedded yet, but basically created a video as if indigo dye or the indigo plant was AI. So basically speaking from the experience of the plant, and it's very collagey, it's very beautiful. And then we have Benray Isabel. This is a bark cloth piece from the Textile Museum. It's the only piece in the collection from Venezuela. It's not known like what kind of bark it is, so Benray's response was to create an interactive PDF where she essentially replicated her ancestry DNA map with different plants that are native to all of the countries of her origin, and kind of speculating on which tree it might have come from, and also speaking of her personal experiences and memories with those plants. Lan Florence Yee made a video, which is also not embedded yet, but the video kind of talks from like a speculative place about this fragment of a sleeve, and speaks from the experience of being a sleeve, like speaks as the sleeve, and yeah, it's hard to explain right now, but I hope that everybody here gets to see it. I'm just gonna check all the time. Okay, I'll try to breeze through these. So Habiba responded to the ceramic piece by creating like a speculative video game. So this is just like a prototype of it, and basically responded to the different elements that she would want to celebrate. She was thinking about video games and board games, and how a lot of the times they have like colonial goals of like conquering a place or like taking things, but in this case she wants to celebrate and kind of create games with the idea of like giving and care. So these different elements are also going to have like narrative pop-ups. Kendra Yee responded to this contemporary piece by Marilyn Levine, who is a contemporary Canadian ceramicist. She has passed away, but on her website prior to her death, she had a page that was like artworks that she didn't know where they were, that she couldn't find. So this drawstring bag that she made, which is hyper-realist, responds to, or Kendra found it basically in the Gardner Museum archive. And here she's responding to like the experience of finding that piece and what Marilyn were. Okay. Juan Pablo responds to this Kimbaya piece and creates a 3D print code for it so that anybody can like freely print it. He made a video where the code is kind of in the background, overlapping, and I think it's cool, like the idea of giving free access to the object. He also thinks a lot about like bootlegging, and this is like a way to give free access. Shahir Zazai responds to the 35 Afghan war rugs in the Textile Museum and removes all the war imagery from them, leaving only natural life and plants and the natural landscape. Yeah, apologies, not everything is embedded yet because we're still building the website. Khadija made this interactive puzzle that as folks put together the pieces, they get to learn more about the labor behind the making of Kashmiri shawls, which are made with basically like a large team of women that come together to weave. Chiedza made a piece of ceramic, which is kind of a musical notation for imagining what it would be like to smoke out of the luo pipette that she responds to. And then, okay, I think I'm running out of time. I'll just show quickly. Here are just some photos of some of the workshops that we've done. So here is a workshop where Habiba showed folks how to make board games. Here's Chiedza's tour that we did before the workshop, and then folks got to learn different hand building methods. And Juan Pablo also showed folks how to make piñatas with paper clay. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Great.
Hello, everyone. I would like to start my presentation by repeating that I am a PhD student at Toronto at Toronto Metropolitan University in the Media and Design Innovation program. And my current research revolves around the object or the archives, a collection of archives called Memory of the World, which is a UNESCO program. And the Memory of the World program makes it better, makes all these archives all over the world better known, and it sort of doesn't give better access, but makes them famous or gives them a certain kind of status. So I guess it helps facilitates research, education, entertainment. The last batch of archives were included back in March. In May, sorry, and the total inscriptions are 494 archives all over the world. And I got interested in this while doing my MFA project in Havana. I encountered these audiovisual archives of the Noticiero Vital Latinoamericano, the Latin American newsreel. It was a newsreel that was produced in Cuba between 1960 and 1990, and pretty much documented all the major events of the Cuban Revolution between those years. And not also that, but it also documented all the revolutionary conflicts all over the world. We have to remember that Cuba was sort of an exporter of revolution or armed conflict all over the world. So all these archives, all these negatives of film, were stored in Cuba for many years, but they were all about to be lost. So eventually the Cinematheca of Cuba started a project to save them, submitted them to UNESCO inscribed them in the register, and by that, eventually the National Institute of Audiovisuals in France helped them to save them and digitize them. So these are the archive. This is the actual archives location.
Cuando viene el periodo especial y se destruye cualquier cantidad de cine cubano, el noticiero, amén de haber sido hecho con ese material orbo que era más duro que los cañones rusos, resistió el no tener electricidad, porque el que cuidaba el almacén, el que lo mantenía, sacó todo de las bóvedas, lo puso en el pasillo y estabilizó la temperatura de los noticieros. Así que la mayoría de los noticieros estaban en mejor estado que el resto de las películas que se habían guardado en bóvedas y que habían tenido hoy frío, mañana no, 3 días sin electricidad y pasado otra vez.
So this project, when I was there, it's like, there was this talk about memory of the world, like, so what is this? So that's why I started doing the research, and I started, digging which projects I would like to do. I mean, there's, 500 of them all over the world. So, of course, I started looking at Latin American archives. I went to Bogota for the acquired book, which is a 17th century manuscript of some of the first music that was actually written in the New World, or let's say in La Nueva Granada. There's also part of that collection. There is one in Mexico City, actually not in Mexico City, sorry. It's in Puebla right now, but it was originally, it was part of the, it's in Oaxaca right now, but it's from the Puebla Cathedral, sorry. And then I was going to go and do these projects, then COVID came, what happened, so we got locked up. And that's when the opportunity came to do the PhD research. So I decided to do something within Canada, obviously, because we didn't know when we were going to be able to travel. So that's how I ended up in Quebec City, the Seminary of Quebec collection, which is what I'm researching right now. So these archives are from 1623 to 1800. Well, that's the part of the archives that I'm researching. This is the building of the seminary. 15 ponds. 400,000 items, letters, maps, publications, manuscripts, etc. It's gigantic. It's impossible. It will take lifetimes to go through it. But eventually, I started doing like small, like 2D animation ideas. I look at photographs and started like, create sort of like images and like, I wanted to do like 2D animation at the time. I found, so I started like animating them and, thinking about it. Recently, I discovered, I started exploring the map collection. I found this very particular one, which was this map that was drawn on a pigskin. And I, was the only one like that. I'd never seen anything like it. And I was really curious about it. And then I started like, then the idea came to me is like, how can I, bring this up to the 21st century? So, so I started like doing more research. I mean, Quebec City has been like deep, thoroughly researched, but I was like, I need to do something beyond this. And eventually, I decided that it would be a good idea to do a 3D reconstruction of it. So, so they gave me the like, okay, how can we make this map alive? And this is what we have come up with, sort of like a 3D plan of it. And it's obviously in the early stages. And but all the research is there. Like our kinds of architects and archaeologists have, looked into this. So eventually, I want to, make details of each one, or imagine at least, because I am not a historian, I'm an artist. So I think my research stays somewhere in between, like historical accuracy and imagination. And that's one of the things that I'm, like, where do I stand? What is my role as an artist? So I continue looking into the archives. This is the latest part that I found. This is the plan of the Collège des Jésuites, the Jesuit College. It's a building that doesn't exist anymore. I found myself in the last 6 months really intrigued by lost architectures. So looking at things that are not there. This is an illustration of the building right after the British invasion in 1759. The drawings were the year after. So this was a Jesuit college. It was an institutional educational institution. It was a religious institution. When the British invaded, they turned it into armory. So it became a military institution, and it changed hands and eventually was destroyed, and that's where the current City Hall of Quebec City stands today. So now it became now a political institution. So all those processes that interest me a lot. And so this is my last, this is what I'm doing now, reconstructing the college. Actually, this render was done late last night. It's still messed up. But it's like, this is where I am right now, like looking at architectures that disappear or that have been transformed, and seeing the possibilities. So I think the next step now is to bring this into like gaming engines to create some sort of narrative. I'm not interested in doing a film on this because I like the game engines that give you the possibility of like multiple possibilities of every person can create their own story. So that shows me or gives me the idea of like parallel histories or alternative histories. So we can all create, explore these materials and give it our own meaning and our histories. This was me today. Actually, this morning I was at the immersion studio at TMU where I'm studying. And this is a 360 space. So, trying to look into ways of bring all this like 3D material into there to start like exploring possibilities for stories. The Cuban movie posters is my other upcoming project. Actually, I have a big deadline tomorrow for a film. It's a animated documentary project called Design in Utopia. The tagline is an artistic revolution that merged cinema and design. The archives of the film posters in Cuba have been inscribed in memory of the world, so it's very timely in that sense. And I would like to take this collection of posters and animate them. So right now it's still in the very early projects, very stages, but working on it. The last archive that I'm also working with is the archives of the Monastery of the Augustine Sisters in Quebec City. It was also inscribed in memory of the world in Maine. And I haven't started yet, but I did my first initial visit and looking at maps, obviously, because I'm obsessed with maps right now. And they have a huge collection of books, and obviously they funded the first hospitals in what it was called New France at the time. So there's archives about medicine and herbs and all the kind of all the things that they did for these hospitals. So so that's to be continued, and we'll see how far we can go with this project. I've done some other smaller approach about looking at, for example, the architecture. So this was a sketch that I found on the Quebec City archives and seminary. And I started looking at creating like 3D animations and all of architecture. I'm not an architect, and but somehow I'm fascinated by all these things. So that's where I'm right now. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Hi, thanks so much for coming out today. This is a great panel. I'm honored to be on it. So I decided not to show any images. Instead, I'm going to describe a couple of images. I'm working on a documentary film called The Photos We Don't Get to See, and it meditates on a single photograph. It's a photo of 5 men. They're dressed nicely, suits and ties. And it's a studio photograph. There's the infinite black space behind them. They look directly into the camera. And it was attached to a memo from the United Fruit Company. And the company manager, it's dated 1928. It's written from Colombia. It describes the 5 men. One of them is described as one of the most dangerous communistic leaders in Colombia. And it gives the name of each of the men. Raúl Eduardo Maecha, Erasmo Coronel, Bernardino Guerrero, and the others, Peme del Rio, Nicanor Serrano. On the emulsion of the photograph, somebody had written in ink 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over the names over the faces of each of the, not over the faces, over like the chest of each person. And also over the emulsion, someone had written the word out over 2 of the people. And then on the memo that accompanied it, the memo was paper clipped, the photo was paper clipped to the memo. There's a check mark next to 2 of the names, the ones who had been out. And it describes that Erasmo Coronel was killed in fighting in Sevilla. And this was a fascinating photograph and memo. And it enables us to think about the 1928 strike of banana workers in Colombia and the 1928 massacre of banana workers. But it also enables us to think about memory. And so this single, I think Nicole suggested that we think about fragments from the archive. This single photograph enables us, and how we got the photo, enables us to sort of begin to reconstruct the strike imaginatively. And the story of how we got that photo, we should have never been able to see this photo. The only reason we have it is an anthropologist named Philippe Bourgois was doing ethnographic field work on the banana plantations between Costa Rica and Panama in the early 1980s. He made friends with a warehouse foreman of the United Fruit Company. United Fruit Company is known today as Chiquita Brands International. And like many researchers, he had tried to get access to the company's archives. At the time, I think they were in Cincinnati, he tried in New York and other places. And the company denied access. So he started to liberate some of the documents from the archive, sort of early Edward Snowden-like move. He begins to put them in his jacket each day for months and months. And then he carries them out at the plantation. And the plantations, you know, if you've ever been on a banana plantation in Central America or Colombia or elsewhere, and they're interesting spaces. There's some security. Anyway, he takes them out each day in his jacket or in his shirt, and then so anyway, I was about 20 years later writing a doctoral thesis on the banana plantations in Honduras and a couple of photographers, really interesting photographers. And I asked Philippe, I said, well, you've got all these documents that you took from the company, could you send them to me? And I'll digitize them and I'll send them back to you a week later with high resolution scans. So he did. He FedExed a couple of boxes of them. I put them on a flatbed scanner, made high-res scans, and sent them back. And one day, I wasn't working on Colombia, but this photograph just sort of, I went and printed it out, and then I pinned it up on my board next to my desk. And one day, I couldn't work on the Honduras project, so I just started writing about the photograph and the memo. And that sat on my hard drive for a year or two. And then I decided, well, let me research the backstory of this photo. Let me see if I can find out about these people, Raúl Eduardo Maecha, Erasmo Coronel, and the others. And so then they have a fascinating story. And then so I ended up finding a lot of things. One of the things I found was that the military general in charge of the operation in Magdalena, a guy named Cortés Vargas, he published a memoir in 1929. It's about 120 pages, and there are a few copies of it available that you can get on interlibrary loan. One copy is at Vanderbilt, so I got it on interlibrary loan. And I'm reading through it and looking through it, and he includes the same damn photograph. The 5 guys in the military general's memoir published a year after the massacre. The only difference is that written over the emulsion are numbers also, but different penmanship, and the order is different. But the caption below gives their names, and the numbers correspond exactly to the same names that you have in the company manager's memo. So I'm like, well, it's obvious that the general had this photograph and used it, and the company manager had this photo. And we would have never gotten access to this had Philippe not stolen it from the archive in the early 80s. And then there's this third, this is an official collection at Harvard University. The United Fruit Company donated some 10,600 photographs to Harvard Business School. And the Colombia collection, I had gone through the Honduras collection a couple of times in separate trips, but I hadn't taken the time to go through the Colombia collection. So I went back and look through the Colombia collection. Yeah, obviously, this photo was not in it. Instead, you get what you would expect. Machines, toppling jungles, drainage canals, hospitals, schools, modernity, great pictures of bananas in every stage of ripeness and different diseases and labeled and temperatures, etc. And so when you contrast the photos we do get to see with the photo we don't get to see, I think we begin to sort of spark imagination. So for the film, what we ended up doing is we hired actually an animator, because I was very clear that we will use the photo, and we filmed in the Harvard collection, we filmed in Colombia, and we filmed here. The photo, Philippe Bourgois ended up donating all of his archives to the University of Toronto, Mississauga. We preserved them and made them available to anyone in the world for free on a website that we built. It's called Visualizing the Americas. Anyhow, we hired an animator because the photograph, it's indexical quality. It presents you with reality in a sort of frontal way, but we didn't want to use that trick, if you will, for the past, for the massacre. So we hired this guy named Clay Rodri to sort of reconstruct 3 or 4 crucial scenes in the film. And he gives this, it's black and red, and so he reconstructs the massacre with animation. But the main point of the film, and it's being supported by the National Film Board of Canada and Señal Colombia. Señal Colombia is a public broadcaster in Colombia, and we competed in they have a mercado de coproducción, and we were fortunate they funded the project for us to finish it. And so we'll go back and refilm all the stuff we did in Colombia, because I'm not a filmmaker, and I wanted to make sure that this film didn't look like a historian made it. I wanted it to look like a filmmaker made it. And so, with no offense to the historians in the room, but when we first started making the film, I didn't know if I could make a film, so I hired a PhD student from Colombia. His name is Andres Pedraza. He's brilliant. But he just had, your basic camera, and we went, and we found incredible stuff, and there were reenactments, because I'd been invited to give a couple lectures for the 90th anniversary of the massacre. And at the time, schools were organizing reenactments of the massacre, and they were putting these performances on in the plaza in Ciénaga where the massacre occurs. And then we filmed also in the plantations, and the interesting thing about memory here is that we asked a banana plantation worker, so what do you remember? Because she and her parents and grandparents and other had worked in this region for generations. What have they told you about the 1928 strike and the 1928 massacre? And she's like, yeah, when was that? And 98, right? And it's just sort of like it blurs, everything blurs. The erasure of memory of this event is in a way by design. The United Fruit Company and the Colombian military sort of, before the violence even happens, it's almost erased. You see it through the suppression of these documents. We interview a number of historians who've worked on this. Mauricio Archival, a well-known Colombian historian, who uncovered documents from the U.S. State Department in which the U.S. ambassador is writing on chronicling it as the strike is unfolding, and then as the massacre and the violence that the military is carrying out afterward. And he at one point says the number killed exceeded 1,000. The number of striking workers killed exceeded 1,000. And then still you get today controversy over whether 9 people were killed. In the official memory, it was 9 dead bodies left in the plaza. How am I doing on time? I'm over?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. That's all I needed to say. I didn't want to go over. I thought it was going to ring, or you were going to tell me.
No,
Okay. No, thank you for your patience.